Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Suit Up, where each week we take a look at the frames that make up Warframe and talk about their abilities and ways to build them. This week we're going to take a look at the Master of Stealth, the King of Trickery, Loki Prime. Loki himself is one of the oldest frames in Warframe, and for the longest time was actually a frame you could select when you first started the game. He proved so popular he was eventually primed, and that popularity continued. And when you look in depth at him, he's really easy to see why. His stats are only really part of the equation. With a base health and shield of 225 at level 30, he is always going to be a seriously squishy frame, and face tanking with Loki is really not his strong suit. You can easily tell where his strongest assets lie when looking at the sprint speed of 1.25, the fastest in the game, and base energy, which is joint second highest in the game, of 262.5. You can tell he's going to be one for manoeuvrability and relying on his skills, and you would be absolutely right. Now when you start to look at his skills, things start to become clearer as to the role Loki's going to provide in a mission. His first ability is called Decoy. Loki deploys a holographic copy of himself, drawing enemy fire. Now this is pretty much self-explanatory. It works much like a taunt and will draw enemy fire away from Loki by firing its weapon on any targets in range. On the Prime version, the Decoy wields a Lex Prime, and although it doesn't do any direct damage, it does have a chance to deal out any of the status procs. So do I use this ability often? Honestly, not really, no I don't. I don't use it very often at all. The problem with this ability tends to be that unless I use it for a very specific purpose, like a target to be able to switch teleport with, I really don't want to use it. Loki's all about stealth, and alerting enemies is the last thing that you really want to do. Way back when Loki was a newer frame, Decoy could be placed under stairs where enemies couldn't reach it, and then they would carry on trying to attack it, especially the infested. Now though, it just spawns with 400 shield and 200 health, which cannot be changed in any way, which means that at a certain level it just gets one shot anyway, so the Decoy really doesn't help. Plus if the infested cannot get to it, they just lose interest and come after you anyway. And so Loki's second ability, and arguably his strongest, Invisibility. Loki camouflages himself, becoming invisible to enemies. Now this ability is so strong because obviously the fact that you can run around completely undetected, either by enemy or by cameras, but it also opens enemies up to being vulnerable to the 400% extra damage from stealth melee attacks, really making Loki an extremely deadly melee specialist. Now it's extremely important to understand that just because you're invisible does not mean that unsilenced weapons will be made silent, not like it used to be. Enemies will still return fire at a location that they heard the shot from. Now it's also important to remember that if you are helping a teammate up, and an uncloaked teammate comes in behind you and tries to res as well, enemies aiming for your teammate can hit you by mistake. And that is a general thing throughout the mission. You can be shot by mistake if a friendly just runs behind you. And this has been the death of many a Loki accidental teammates. Now this ability really is his bread and butter skill. He really doesn't have the HP to be able to take enemies head on, and invisibility really mitigates pretty much all the damage he can come into. Although as you can imagine, things like nullifiers really do make invis pretty difficult at times, and an accidental uncloak can spell death. But Loki does have an augment for invisibility, which I reviewed in my modular series, Hushed Invisibility. So for a more in-depth look, head over to that video there. Loki's third ability is Switch Teleport. Loki instantaneously swaps positions with the target, confusing the enemy. This ability really doesn't have much to talk about, to be honest. It works in much the same way as the Grineer Commander, and enemies will be disoriented and will not attack for a short time after the ability has been used. It's also important to note that this can be done on allies as well, although they might not be thankful for it, unless they are downed, in which you can actually switch them to a place where it's easy to res them from, as well as with yours and other Loki's decoys, which can help you get into hard to reach places. To be honest, I don't really use this ability much other than to help seriously cheese my way past certain rooms in Spy 2.0. or to reach hard to get places when hunting for caches in Sabotage or Syndicate medallions. Like Invisibility, Switch Teleport also comes with an augment mod, Safeguard Switch, and what this does is that allies switch teleported will become invulnerable for a short amount of time. Now, do I think this mod is worth it? Not really, no. The reason behind that is firstly, self-survival. Switch teleporting an ally out that might be in danger means switching yourself straight into that danger, which can sometimes lead to you switch teleporting out a bleeding out friendly, and then going down to yourself, which really doesn't help the team at all. In addition to that, most teammates that I play with don't appreciate you all of a sudden switching them to a completely different location, and some get quite annoyed by this. But the biggest thing of all is that when you're switching friendly out of harm's way, they don't really need the invulnerability because most of the time you're switching them to safety or into a much safer place, so the invulnerability really is of no use to them. I honestly wouldn't recommend the mod at all. I'd certainly not lose a mod slot for it. Now, Loki's fourth ability is easily one of his best, and one that deserves a build all to itself, Radial Disarm. Loki lets forth a wave of energy, disrupting the projectile weapons of enemies in range and forcing them to revert to melee combat. So what this means is that ranged enemies hit by the Radial Disarm will drop their weapons and revert to their stun batons, turning them from ranged into melee units. Obviously some units cannot be affected by this, like the majority of melee units and bosses, while everything else can be hit by it. Amusingly, this even works on the infested. Mowers lose their ranged abilities, and enemies like the leapers and crawlers are literally disarmed, although they can still hit you just fine. The ability has become a staple of high level play, removing high level weapons from enemies like bombards or even ballistas vastly improves the survival of groups aiming to do high level content, especially in places like the Law of Retribution trial, where he's become a staple member of any group. I use this ability a lot when I play on Loki, and I have a build that I use specifically for it. When combined with things like a Speed Nova and a Vauban, even void defense missions become an absolute breeze with the Radial Disarm, as they rush to the pod with melee weapons and just get hit by the vortex. Now, Radial Disarm does come with an augment, Irradiating Disarm. Now this mod will make every enemy hit by Disarm also take a radiation proc, making them turn on themselves. This augment, I feel, it kind of has a limited use. The whole reason for the Disarm is to turn them into melee units to make them easier to kill, either with things like Vauban's Vortex, or making them come in close to be meleeed to death. Making them all sit and try and kill each other most of the time is pretty much counterproductive. Now there are times where it would be useful, like for crowd control in a sticky situation, or even places like the trial on the second stage to keep units like the Scorpions busy, and not pull your friendly units off the buttons. I mean, it's not a bad augment, and certainly not one of the worst. It's just very much dependent on the situation as to whether it's actually worth putting onto the build. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod Loki Prime. Now he comes with a dash polarity in his aura, he also comes with 2 Ds other than a dash. So actually realistically we don't need to put any former on here. I did because, well, my build has changed so many times that I've sort of lost track of what I need and what I don't need. But actually, in all honesty, Loki Prime comes with so many polarities that you don't need any former on him whatsoever. So this build here is pretty much my standard sort of raid build. It's my disarm build. So we've got corrosive projection on there. We've got overextended and stretched to make sure we got the max range on that radial disarm. Prime continuity and constitution, which is going to work to increase the duration for our invisibility. We got primed flow, which is going to help us cast more, but it's also going to work with quick thinking as our tanky mods, just in case we get hit outside of the stealth. And then obviously we've got streamline and then a rank 4 fleeting to just give us the max efficiency, and obviously rank 4, so it gives us max efficiency, but we don't lose too much in the duration. Now my invis build, and this is my Spy 2.0 build, I've got energy siphon on there. I've got as many of the duration mods as possible. Narrow-minded, primed continuity, constitution on there. Again, we got primed flow, which is going to work with quick thinking as our defensive mods. We've got streamline on here. And personally, I think that with Energy Siphon, having only Streamline, I mean, the duration on your Invis, by the time that you uncloak again, the Energy Siphon is going to have given you enough energy with the Streamline to be able to just cloak again immediately. And then we've got, obviously, Hushed Invisibility. And I use this so I don't really have to worry about what weapons I use. So I don't really have to bring stealth weapons. I can just bring pretty much whatever. I mean, I use Spy 2.0 a lot when I'm leveling. So having this Hushed Invisibility on here is absolutely fantastic for me. And then we got Overextended on here, which is to counteract the Narrow-Minded, and which is going to give us more range for the Switch Teleport, because I use the Decoy Switch Teleport a lot in Spy 2.0, so this really does help the build for that. And this is probably my general Invis build, and then my sort of more general, my day-to-day Loki build for it, you know, using Tower 4, for using raids. This is pretty much what I'll use for that. So is he worth the effort, the time and resources invested into maxing him? And the answer to that should be absolutely obvious. Of course he is. Loki's been a thorn in DE's side for a long time, and the amount of Loki is overpowered videos and posts on the forums we saw back in the day was absolutely insane. And honestly, the only change he's ever really got was a change from every weapon being silent to only silent weapons being silent. Even though that's back in the game again with the new Syndicate mod. Used properly, Loki is an absolute powerhouse. Invisible resurrection when a teammate goes down, removal of ranged weapons in a given area, stealth melee multipliers. He does it all. Quite frankly, Loki makes an absolute mockery of most of the Spy 2.0 runs. And with a crafty Decoy Switch Teleport, meaning you can pretty much complete any room in about 20 seconds or less. It's absolutely insane. I didn't honestly use Loki for the longest time really, and he eventually ended up featuring in pretty much every single one of our clan's setups for long run missions. He really has managed to switch teleport into most people's hearts, and is one of the game's most popular frames, and it's clear to see why. Currently, Loki Prime is one of the harder primes to farm, with the drop rate on his systems being incredibly low. However, once you have him, you have access to one of the strongest and most versatile frames in the game. He takes a while to master because he doesn't take a lot of punishment, so keeping an eye on your invis timer is paramount, but played right, he is an absolute powerhouse. As always guys, many thanks for watching. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.